She's nothing. She's a glorified bookkeeper who got lucky, my brother-in-law said into his phone, not realizing I was standing 6 feet away in the hallway. I said nothing. I turned around, walked back to my car, and drove home to my daughter. Her name is Maya. She had just turned 6 years old 3 days earlier. My parents didn't come. My sister didn't come. My brother-in-law, the one on the phone, sent a card with a single emoji drawn in crayon, clearly done by his assistant as a joke. My daughter sat at the kitchen table in her purple birthday dress, the one she picked out herself 2 weeks before, and she looked at the empty chairs around our little table and asked me the question I had been dreading all afternoon. Mommy, did they forget? I told her no. I told her they were just busy. I told her we were going to have the best birthday anyway, just the two of us, and I meant every word of it. We ate the strawberry cake I'd baked from scratch. We watched her favorite movie twice. I held her until she fell asleep, and I didn't cry until I was alone in the kitchen at midnight, standing over the sink, listening to the house settle around me. I let myself have that one night. Then I went back to work. My name is Claire. I am 31 years old. For the past 4 years, I have worked as a federal compliance auditor for a private firm that contracts with the SEC and several state-level financial oversight boards. What that means, in plain language, is this. When a company is suspected of fraud, misreporting, or financial misconduct, my team comes in and takes everything apart. We go through every account, every transfer, every shell company, every favor disguised as a consulting fee. We find what people tried to hide. And then we hand our findings to people with the authority to act on them. I am very good at my job. My family didn't know what I actually did for a living. I had tried to explain it once, early on at a Thanksgiving dinner 4 years ago. My brother-in-law, whose name is Todd, had laughed and said it sounded like a lot of spreadsheets. My mother had changed the subject to my sister's new kitchen renovation. After that, I stopped trying to explain. To them, I was Claire. The quiet one, the one who didn't marry well, which in their language meant I had married someone who didn't come from money. My ex-husband Daniel and I had separated when Maya was 2. It was not dramatic. He was not a bad man. We were just wrong for each other in ways that took too long to admit, and when we finally let go, it was almost a relief for both of us. He lives in Portland now. He calls Maya every Sunday. He pays his child support on time every month without being asked. My family had decided, based on nothing, that the divorce meant I had failed, that I was struggling, that I needed their guidance and their pity and their occasional financial input, which always came attached to opinions I hadn't asked for. What they did not know was that 18 months after my divorce was finalized, I had been promoted twice, that I had recently been assigned as lead auditor on one of the largest cases my firm had taken on in a decade, that I had bought my own house, modest, but mine, with a down payment I had saved entirely by myself. They didn't know because I had stopped telling them things, and they had stopped asking. The birthday was the last straw, but it was not the beginning. The beginning was 6 months earlier, at my parents' anniversary dinner, when my mother pulled me aside and told me that my father's business was going through a rough patch, and that it would mean a lot to the family if I could contribute something. She named a number. It was not a small number. I asked her what the money would be used for. She said it was complicated. I said I would think about it. I did think about it. I thought about it very carefully. My father's business was a regional commercial real estate development company. He and Todd had been running it together for the past 7 years, ever since Todd married my sister Vanessa, and my father had handed him a VP title and an office with a view. On paper, the company looked fine. In conversation, it sounded like it was thriving. Todd talked constantly about new projects, new investors, new opportunities. But my mother's face when she asked me for money looked like a face I had seen before. Not at family dinners. At work. I didn't say anything. Not then. 2 months after the anniversary dinner, my father called me directly. He said the rough patch had gotten rougher. He said they had a deal falling through and a payment deadline coming up, and if they didn't cover it, they could lose the whole portfolio. He asked if I could help. I asked him to send me the documents. He sent them that same evening. 15 attachments. Balance sheets, loan agreements, A partnership contract, investor summaries. I opened the first file, and within 4 minutes I saw it. I didn't sleep that night. I went through everything twice. Then I called my supervisor at 7 in the morning and told him I needed to talk. Here's what the documents showed. Todd had been running a side structure within my father's company for at least 3 years. It was layered, and it was not amateur work. There was a separate LLC, a consulting subsidiary, that existed on paper as a vendor providing services to the main company, except the services were vague to the point of fiction. Strategic advisory, market positioning support, executive facilitation. These were invoices being generated internally and paid out to a separate account that my father did not control and possibly did not know existed. Todd had been billing my father's own company for fake services and pocketing the difference. Based on what I could see in the files my father had innocently sent me, the amount was somewhere north of $400,000. Possibly significantly more. My father had asked me for help. He had accidentally handed me the evidence. I sat with this for 3 days. I want to be honest about that. I didn't act immediately. I sat with it because the man being defrauded was my father, and the man doing it was married to my sister, and the business being gutted was the one my father had spent 25 years building. This was not a distant case with strangers and numbers on a screen. These were people I had eaten Christmas dinner with. But then I thought about Maya in her purple dress asking me if they had forgotten. I thought about my mother calling me a glorified bookkeeper at my own daughter's expense, behind my back, with a smile at every family gathering. I thought about being asked for money by people who didn't respect me enough to show up for my child. And I thought about the fact that what Todd was doing was a crime. Not a family squabble. Not a misunderstanding. A federal-level financial crime that my father was currently hemorrhaging money because of, while being kept completely in the dark. I made my decision. I did not confront Todd. I did not warn my sister. I did not call my parents. I wrote a detailed memo to my supervisor. I forwarded the documents. I disclosed that the subject company was connected to my family and asked to be kept at arm's length from any direct enforcement action to avoid any appearance of personal interest in the outcome. My firm took it from there. In the meantime, my father called again. He asked if I had looked at the documents. I told him yes. I told him I couldn't advise him directly because of my professional role, but that I strongly recommended he hire an independent forensic accountant immediately and have them audit the consulting subsidiary specifically. He asked me why. I told him to trust me. He went quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Is it Todd?" I didn't answer. But he was a smart man. He had built a company from nothing. He understood what it meant that his compliance auditor daughter was telling him to look at a specific subsidiary. Without explaining why, he hired the accountant the following week. 3 weeks after that, Todd received a notice from my firm's legal team. 2 weeks after that, he received a second notice from the State Financial Oversight Board. A week after that, my sister called me for the first time in 4 months, screaming. I let her scream. There was a lot of it. She said I had betrayed the family. She said I had gone behind everyone's backs. She said Todd had explained everything to her and it was a misunderstanding, and the way I had handled it was vindictive and cruel. She said I had always resented her success. She said a lot of things. When she stopped, I asked her one question. Did Todd ever show you the consulting subsidiary accounts? Silence. Did you know about the LLC? More silence. Vanessa, I said, very quietly, your husband has been stealing from Dad for 3 years. I didn't do that. I just found it. She hung up. My mother called an hour later. Her voice was different. Not screaming, just cold, which with her was worse. She said I had humiliated the family. She said I had gone to my employer with personal family business and made us all look criminal. I told her that the only person who had done anything criminal was Todd. She told me that I had always had a problem being part of a family and that my divorce should have told me something about myself. I said, I have to go pick up Maya from school. I hung up. Todd's attorney reached out to my firm 3 days later, attempting to negotiate a quiet resolution. My firm declined to negotiate. The documentation was too clean. I had handed them a complete picture without even trying. What followed took about 4 months and was largely handled by people above my pay grade, which was by design. I showed up where I was asked to show up and said what I was asked to say. At one point there was a deposition, and Todd's attorney attempted to reframe my role as personally motivated retaliation stemming from a family dispute. The mediator looked at him over her glasses and said, "Her employer initiated this inquiry. She recused herself from direct participation. Would you like to revise your characterization?" Todd's attorney did not revise his characterization, but he said it more quietly after that. The final outcome, Todd's LLC, was dissolved. The amount recovered and returned to my father's company was $462,000. Todd faced financial penalties and a permanent bar from serving as an officer or director of any company operating under state financial regulation. My sister filed for divorce 6 weeks after the settlement was reached, which I had not expected and did not ask for. My father came to my house on a Tuesday evening in November. He knocked on the door and stood on my porch holding a paper bag with 2 containers of soup from the diner I'd liked as a kid. Maya opened the door before I could get there and looked up at him with no particular expression because she barely knew him. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at me and said, "I didn't come to her birthday." I said, "No, you didn't." He said, "I didn't come because Todd and your mother said you'd been difficult and it was better to give you space." I didn't say anything. "I should have come anyway," he said. "She's my granddaughter." Maya tugged my sleeve and whispered very loudly, the way 6-year-olds whisper, "Is that the grandpa who forgot?" My father flinched like she'd hit him. I let him in. I let Maya show him her birthday drawings, still taped to the refrigerator. I let him sit at the kitchen table and eat soup with us. He didn't try to explain himself too much, which I appreciated. He mostly just watched Maya. She warmed up to him faster than I expected because she was 6 and generous in ways I was still learning from. Before he left, he stopped at the door and said, "I owe you more than soup." I said, "Just come next time." He nodded. My mother took longer. She did eventually call, about 2 months after my father's visit, and her apology was partial and somewhat defensive and contained the phrase, "I was under a lot of stress," more than once. It was not a perfect apology, but I am 31, not 16, and I no longer need perfection from people to allow them back into a limited radius of my life. I told her she could come to Maya's next birthday if she wanted to. She came. She brought a gift that was too expensive, which was her way of compensating, and she was stiff with Maya for the first hour, which was her way of being nervous. By the end of the afternoon, Maya had her grandmother on the living room floor helping her build a block tower. I stood in the kitchen doorway watching them, and I thought about the version of me who had cried at the sink at midnight a year earlier. I thought about how quiet I had been for so long, how many dinners I had sat through, absorbing their dismissal, their careless assumptions, their low ceiling for who I was allowed to be. I hadn't set out to burn anything down. I had set out to protect my father from a crime, and to do my job with integrity. The rest had followed from that. The pieces had moved the way pieces move when the truth finally has room to stand up straight. Todd sent me a message to his attorney, near the end of the process, saying he hoped we could eventually reach a place of understanding as a family. I did not respond to that message. Not every bridge deserves to be rebuilt. Some of them led somewhere that was never good for you. Some people show you clearly and consistently who they are, and the most powerful thing you can do is simply believe them and plan accordingly. I believed Todd the first time I opened that file and saw what he had built in the dark. I believed my mother the moment she didn't show up for Maya. What I know after everything is this: quiet is not the same as weak. Patience is not the same as acceptance. And the most dangerous thing I ever did for the people who underestimated me was exactly what I had always done. I just kept doing my job. Maya starts 2nd grade in the fall. She has decided she wants to be a veterinarian, or possibly a princess, or possibly both. She made me promise we would have a big party this year with at least 12 people. I told her we would have however many people she wanted. Last week she asked me if Grandma was coming. I told her yes. She thought about this for a second and then she said, "What about the grandpa with the soup?" I laughed. "Yes, him too." She nodded very seriously, like she was approving a guest list. "Okay," she said, "but I'm still picking the cake." I told her the cake was all hers.